My name's Michael Carrier.
Deb Hedke.
Joe Wesner.
I've been with Worthington Schools for about 14 years.
School bus driver for Worthington City Schools, and I've been here 11 years.
For a year and a half.
I can't call it a job, I can't call it a career. It's the best deal in town.
My kids went K through 12 in Worthington Schools, and I like kids, and I thought it'd be a really neat thing to do.
What I look forward to every day is just, being around the kids, being around my fellow bus drivers.
And if you love to drive, which I do, and you love kids, which I do, you look forward to going to work on Monday mornings. You don't dread it.
If someone was asking me about the experience I've had at Worthington Schools,
It's fun. Once you learn how to drive the bus, and we have great onboard instructors that teach you how to turn the bus on a dime,
it's a good choice.
and they'll take out any doubt in your mind that you can't do it.
It was for me, and I believe would be for you also.
The kids in Worthington community, I can't speak for other communities, but in our community, the kids will respond, and the parents are very supportive.
And once in a while, I'll run into them at a field trip or a sporting event, and I hear this scream, Mr. Mike, and I look up and I see somebody, and it's one of the kids that I transported for years.
The first day of school, when I picked up and then dropped off the kindergarten students, just the look of joy on the parents' faces when they arrived home from school. Pretty cool.
My grandkids are grown, so being around these kids today is a lot of pleasure. I really enjoy it and look forward to it every morning.
To me, it's the best deal in town. You'd be crazy not to at least consider it.
We fist bump as they get on the bus and fist bump when they get off the bus.
You actually can change kids' lives.
Makes you happy and makes, obviously, the student happy.
Come join us. We're worth it.
Hey, we're out here at Worthington Park doing our spring cookout to end the school year. We'll be going around to all the schools through the end of the year. All the kids are super excited to have some fresh grilled burgers for lunch.
Okay, I have 6:30. I'm calling the meeting to order. Before we get started with our agenda this evening, I would like to ask for all of us to take a moment to offer warm hearts to members of our community who are in pain. Last Tuesday, an automobile accident took the life of our Perry sixth grader, Elia Barbon. Also injured in that accident was our employee, Whitner Gator. In addition to that tragedy, and on the very same day, we lost a beloved bus driver, Pete Watkins. Pete had just driven the Thomas Worthington High School track team to Worthington Kilbourne High School for a competition, and he collapsed. Earlier in that same week, last week, we also learned of an unexpected death of a former colleague, Matt Doherty. As an organization, we pride ourselves on relationships, caring about our kids, and caring about our staff members. These tragedies are unthinkable and hurt us to our very core. I ask now that you please take a couple of moments and offer healing thoughts to our Worthington Schools community. Thank you very much. At this time, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Here. At this time, I'd like to introduce those of us who are sitting up here at this table. On your far right is Board Member Kelly Davis. Next to her is Board Member Jennifer Best. Next to me on my left, your right, is our treasurer, TJ Cusick. I'm Charlie Wilson, the board president. Next to me is our superintendent, Dr. Trent Bowers. Next to Dr. Bowers is board vice president, Nikki Hudson. And next to her is board member, Amy Lloyd. At this time, I ask that everyone please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it was sent out on Thursday.
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments? Addenda, okay. Any discussion, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, the agenda is approved. Before we get to the part of the agenda that every single board member, well, actually all 7 of us up there, including our superintendent, our treasurer, enjoy the most, that is our recognition. I want to take just a minute to acknowledge the fact that this is Teacher Appreciation Week. The teachers in Worthington schools are tremendous champions for our children. They live our belief in being kind to kids. They believe in growth for the children they serve, and teaching to our teachers is so much more than being a deliverer of content. Our teachers strive to be trusted adults, creating space where kids can thrive. Sometimes our teachers are nurses, sometimes they're meal providers, sometimes they're cheerleaders, sometimes they're confidants, and according to my 2 sons who went all the way through the school here, sometimes our teachers are comedians. To our teachers, I just say this: have a wonderful week, and thank you for everything you do. For all of our staff, we as a board are so very, very fortunate that each of you chooses to serve in Worthington. So teachers and staff, we love you, we celebrate you, we love you and celebrate you this day, this week, every day, and every week. Never forget, as a wise philosopher once wrote, it's worth it. That wise philosopher is our superintendent. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, teachers. Okay, now it's our chance to thank our students and to acknowledge their wonderful, wonderful achievements. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to recognize our phenomenal students.
So moved. Second.
We've got a motion and a second, and it can't be official unless we vote. So Mr. Cusick, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
The motion to recognize our students passes. And at this time, I would like to ask Vice President Hudson to, I guess, MC the honors.
Thank you, Charlie. It is our distinct pleasure to recognize and celebrate the 2023 Ohio PTA Reflection winners tonight. If I could ask Tasha Addy, sorry, I will speak up. I can see in the back. If I could ask Tasha Addy, who is our PTA Council President, to join. The PTA is absolutely instrumental in this program, and you will learn why. Tasha is going to share a little bit about the program, and then we'll ask the students to come up.
Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight so we could recognize some awesome and amazing students that we have here in the district. Just to give you a little bit of background about what we're recognizing these students for tonight, I wanted to share a little bit of history with you. The National PTA Organization, which is national across the United States and has PTA organizations throughout every state, supports a Reflections program every year. Reflections allows us to recognize arts in our schools for those students who wish to participate and those schools who also wish to participate in the Ohio PTA program as well as the National PTA program. So this year we did have 7 buildings in our district participate in that program. And what that means is we have coordinators at each building and volunteer judges at each building that will judge the entries that come in the categories of music composition, literature, film, production, visual arts, dance choreography, and photography. And so this year we had 160 entries across the city of Worthington from those 7 buildings come to the district level for review. And at the district level then we had to review 52 of those. 52 of those then were reviewed and 14 of those placed first. Those 14 entries were then moved on to be reviewed at the Ohio PTA level. Those 14 entries were then reviewed, and 8 of our 14 entries received recognition at the state level, which is amazing. So tonight we wanted to take the opportunity to recognize all 8 of those students who placed at the Ohio level, as well as 2 of those students who placed first and moved on to the national level. So Nikki will go into the detail about that here in a minute. But before I pass it over to Mrs. Hudson, I wanted to at least just say thank you to a few people, Dr. Bowers and the entire leadership team here in Worthington, because without your support of this program, we wouldn't be able to offer it, as well as the principals at each of the local buildings, because it takes a village to make this happen. We have to organize judges for each of those categories at each building, and then we also have to organize judges at the district level to be able to move those entries forward. We did have judges at the district level. Allie Garner from Worthington Park did our music. Melanie Brynick from Worthington Park did our literature review. Vanessa O'Leary from Thomas Worthington did our film production. Addie McElroy from KMS and Perry did our dance choreography review. We had 3 community members review our visual art entries. Michael Tizano, an artist in the community. Elizabeth Rajala and Mary Anderson. And then Maria Picken reviewed our photography. So thank you to all of our judges who helped make that happen.
Thank you, Mrs. Addy. Thank you as well to our PTA council and all of our PTAs, because they are the ones who orchestrate. So while it does take a village, it also requires someone to lead. So if we can get a round of applause for Tasha and her fellow board member. So without further ado, students, when we call your name, if you're here with us tonight, please come on up so that we can give you your certificate of recognition and a pen. The following students moved on to National PTA for review after receiving first place at the state level. Margaret Masterson for Film Production, Evening Street, Intermediate Division. Congratulations. Greta Larosky, and forgive me if I did not, I tried to practice all of them, I missed one. Okay, Greta is not with us tonight. The following students received top 3 placements or honorable mention in their age group and category. And Margaret, do you mind, if you're not uncomfortable, will you come back on up? Because we want to take a picture with everyone. I promise we're very kind up here. Thank you. You can just stand right here with us, I promise. It's all good. Jacqueline Mach for Music Composition, Evening Street, Intermediate Division, received second honorable mention. Morgan Grisey, Photography for Worthington Estates, Intermediate Division, third honorable mention. Congratulations, Morgan. Jasper Salnick, Dance Choreography, Worthington Estates, second place and award of Outstanding Achievement. I promise. Thank you. Isabella Bird, Film Production, Colonial Hills, second place and award of Outstanding Achievement. And we had a few kiddos who weren't able to join us, but just in case they ended up arriving, Gavin Steidel, Music Composition, Kilbourne Middle. Oh, yay, Gavin's here. Excellent. Congratulations, Gavin, received third place and award of merit. And London Anderson for Visual Arts, Kilbourne Middle, first honorable mention. If everyone can join me, a huge round. On behalf of the entire Board of Education and our administration, truly congratulations. One of the things that I think is most remarkable about this program is it is an opportunity, meaning that you chose to do it and put forth your best work. So congratulations, it's very respectable.
Thank you very much. What awesome students we have, and what awesome teachers we have, and what an awesome community we have. At this time, for those of you, first of all, you're all welcome to stay for the whole meeting or any part of the meeting, but this is really a very convenient time. If you've got other things to do, more art to work on, more photography to work on, or homework, or supper to eat after a soccer game, feel free to leave. This is a good time to leave. Do we have another student? Oh, okay. I'm going to wait. Yep, picture's worth it. We can always wait for Mom taking pictures of our students. Oh, yep, let's do it. A soccer player, awesome. No, come on up. Come on up. Oh, softball player. I'm sorry. You are right.
Congratulations, everyone.
What extraordinarily multi-talented students we have, not just music, but also softball. That's awesome. Okay, at this time is the visitor comment portion of our meeting. The school board and the administrative staff certainly encourage and appreciate community interest in the meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed for the school board, for us 5 school board members, to hear the views of community members about their schools and about items on the agenda. I ask that each speaker please confine your comments, please come up to the podium and limit your comments to 3 minutes because we have more than 6 speakers. So I ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Consistent with and also please give your name and your street address prior to your comments. Consistent with our board policy, I do ask that any complaints about a particular employee be referred to the superintendent and not be addressed in our public session. Also, I'd like to remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all our students and community members. Again, we want to remind speakers that we value public input, and we always appreciate it when our community members remember our district's values. Please refrain from using harmful or offensive language, and please share your comments in a civil and respectful manner. This is an opportunity for us to hear the public. This is not a time for us to respond to remarks during the visitor comment period. It's a chance for us, board members and administrators, to hear what you have to say. So at this time, I will ask that And I want to thank all 7 speakers for sharing their views in a very civil and respectful manner. Thank you very much. Now we move to an opportunity for the administration to inform the board about a curriculum update of our preschool curriculum and the updating of that curriculum. So
thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Yep.
As Tricia and her team make their way to the lectern, I'd just like to share that in June of 2022, the Ohio Department of Education implemented new state standards for public preschools. So this presentation that you're about to see tonight will outline how, in response, our team, our Worthington Schools team, early childhood program has updated their curriculum to be in alignment with these new standards. So the staff at Sutter Park has collaboratively worked throughout the school year. I talked to them a little bit today, and they're excited to share with you what they have done so that we are ready for the fall of 2023. Tricia?
Thank you. I'm going to preface this with I do better speaking in front of small children. Adults scare me a little bit.
You can imagine
So
we're all children.
Thank you, board members, Dr. Bowers, and the rest of our leadership for allowing my curriculum team and myself to provide updates about our curriculum. So with me, I have Megan Valentino and Jessica Hartman. And so they are part of our curriculum team that has worked with all of our staff to update our curriculum. Yeah. So as Angie shared, the state of Ohio has early learning and development standards for public preschools to follow. And they recently updated those learning standards back in June of 2022. They gave public schools a year to update their own curriculum, whether they write their own or they purchase a curriculum. And so throughout this school year, my staff and I met several times a month to review the new standards, compare them to the old standards, and update our curriculum. The work is going to continue on through the summer and the fall as we work towards our curriculum maps, our curriculum assessment, and resources that we will share in a little bit. So as I shared, the state updated the early learning standards. It was a collaboration of 150 early childhood providers throughout the state of Ohio. These standards place an emphasis on the whole child. As many of you might know, in preschool, we focus on all areas of development. A significant change in our standards include our indicators, and I'm going to show you kind of what these look like. So we have different domains. So for example, one of the domains might be language and literacy. Then it goes down into a strand which talks about a component, gives a standard statement, and then it provides indicators which are on a developmental continuum, starting with our earliest learners through kids that are about age 6. So we work with kids who have skills from about infant through ages 6. And we're going to give a little examples of what this looks like.
So just to give a little snapshot of what some of these look like, one of our main domains is in the area of language and literacy. And the standard here is develops an awareness of initial sounds, onset, and rhymes in spoken words. So like Tricia said, we're looking at the developmental continuum of birth up through age 6. And so that could be as simple as just making eye contact with you and kind of sharing joint attention by looking at you all the way up through, blending and segmenting onset and rhyme. So as a curriculum team and as an individual teacher, we're responsible for kind of providing that standard for each and every one of our students. There we go. And so just a little snapshot of what that might look like in a classroom. On the right there, you'll see students utilizing our Foundations curriculum, similar to our early early childhood partnership with elementary school, as well as the Hegarty curriculum. So we're looking at lines, shapes, curves, all kinds of things prior to even looking at letters. We also, not only are we doing paper to pencil type tasks, but we're also doing everything through play in the preschool environment. So you'll see language and literacy not only at like a language and literacy table or in a small group or in large group instruction, but also in play throughout the classroom. Social emotional development is arguably one of our greatest areas in the preschool environment. Our kindergarten teachers say if you can just get them ready to be in a classroom, that would be best case scenario. And so again, we're looking at birth all the way up through age 6. And so the standard here is develop socially competent behaviors with peers. So that may be exploring a peer by touching their face, exploring their face, looking at them, looking across the room to see what kids are doing, smiling at a peer, all the way up through playing with them, having conversation with them, engaging with them. And so those are all things that we're kind of responsible for writing into this curriculum and then implementing with our own students. There's some cuties engaging together in a game.
Yeah, I'll do this one. No, that's okay. So as I said, we worked on, as a team through these different standards. So I had linked them in the presentation of the standards that you can find on ODE's website, as well as the document of our curriculum. And then I'm going to have Megan share next.
So in addition to our curriculum, we've extended it where we have curriculum maps so that we ensure all the kids are walking away with the same information when they leave Sutter. So these curriculum maps are broken down into units of studies and themes. It is aligned to the standards. We've included core vocabulary, different unit vocabulary. There are learning targets in there, and then also resources such as books. And I'll show you what that looks like. And so again, a little bit next will be, but our students, again, as we have said, they come to us, they are 3 to 6, so we have a wide range of skills that we are addressing with the students, and we want to provide that differentiated instruction and provide clear learning targets, and we want to make sure all students are learning the same things and having those same opportunities in our classrooms across in all 17 classrooms, I guess, at Sutter. So this is what our current curriculum maps look like, and as Tricia said, we'll be working on updating these to go, but it starts with our units of study, and these were all aligned. This one is an example of community, but we also have some that include the environment, and those came from the social studies and science standards, and then they are broken down into essential questions, which then teachers can develop the learning targets from. We have key vocabulary, and our speech therapists really use this as well and incorporate that. And we have our pacing, it gives us our pacing of the curriculum and how quickly we are moving within each of these units. And then here's where it's further broken down into, you can see there's the standards in each map. So this one represents listening and speaking, and then we have books that align to that, and then various activities that teachers can utilize, and that is aligned to all of the standards. And these are just some examples, some pictures of students engaged in our curriculum. Then we go further. We have our Worthington curriculum-based assessment, which is also aligned to our curriculum, and it assesses areas of development. It's a developmental progression from the age ranges of birth to 6 years old. We assess children 2 times a year using this, and it is aligned to step up to quality. And their standards for it. And this is just an example of what it looks like. So by 3 years old, in the language and literacy, we're expecting children to be able to match letters, distinguish pictures from letters and words in a text, recognize familiar logos, ask simple questions, and ask for help when needed. Okay. Questions?
You're going to hand it over to me.
Thank you for an awesome presentation. And questions or comments? Golly?
I don't really have any questions. Charlie, you and I listened to this when we visited Sutter Park, so this was just a good reminder. So I appreciate the update.
Jennifer?
Thank you for being here and the presentation, and I love the addition of the kids' pictures in here, but I don't think I have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Nikki?
No specific questions. I just want to share, we have shared this when you have not been in the room. We regularly receive positive feedback about Sutter and what a gem it is in our district. So thank you very much for all that you do for our students and our community. Really appreciate it. And congratulations, Dr. Winland.
Oh, thank you. I don't like public attention. Thank you.
I also don't have any comments, but thank you all for being here this evening and sharing all of this with us about some of our youngest learners.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate everyone's support.
Hey, wait a minute.
Oh, sorry.
And I haven't had my chance, but go ahead.
I'm so sorry, Charlie.
Sorry.
Just thinking about your original presentation when Charlie and I, we met the CLC team all met there, and just the changes that happened were not small changes. Like you guys have had to make great adjustments, and I'm probably not going to communicate it well, but just so you guys all know, I don't think I think they downplayed like all the work that they had to put into this. And so just remembering that, like all the steps, how much things increased and how much more assessments you have to do and how many more categories there are, which are all beneficial for our students and all great things, but you guys just rose to that occasion. So I just wanted to add that, like, this was no small feat.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have a question, but first a couple of comments. I want to echo, first of all, what Ms. Hudson said, which is that Sutter Park is widely regarded as a real gem in this district. So thank you for all you do for the students there. And no, it's awesome. And secondly, prior to the pandemic, I was a regular come to visit for half a day or so, 2 or 3 times a year. And what I was blown away by, and of course this presentation really hits the nail on the head, which is the intentionality that it looks like at 30,000 feet, like you're just playing with the kids and letting the kids play. But as I talked to teachers then, it quickly became clear everything was done with intention. And of course, this presentation points out how intentional, your examples here for both social emotional learning and for literacy, how intentional everything is done. And that's just critical to being great educators. Everything you do is done with an intention and you know why you're doing it. So I appreciate that. My question is, how much different are the new standards from the 2012 standards?
So the 2012 standards, it was probably about 50 pages long, I would say. What they did is they took the standards and they condensed them into the indicators. So there's some standards that have been removed. There's some standards that were moved to a different developmental category. We saw a big addition to the language and literacy, which I think was their way to try to align to the push for language and literacy in the elementary levels. But a lot of the other standards remained very similar. The wording might have been tweaked, but we kind of had to work through a lot of those movements and changes.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, having been a teacher at the university level for 42 years, I firmly believe the shorter things are, the more people learn from them. Yeah. Rather than longer things. So thank you very much. And again, I just want to tell our 2 teachers here, but Megan and Jessica? Yeah, Megan and Jessica. Again, we love you and we celebrate you today, this week, and every day and every week. So thank you very much, and thank you for a great presentation. I know how much time that took, and really enjoyed it when you did it for the Curriculum Liaison Committee, and this is just fabulous.
Well,
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all your support.
Congratulations, Dr. Wynn.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are having the first reading of several policy updates, and I don't know if the policy committee or Mr. Banks is going to present, but I think we all had access to a copy of the updates.
I think I can start. Majority of the updates, I think that everyone also received. Did everyone also receive the summary?
Yes.
Okay. Special thanks to Tracy for putting that together for all of us. A majority of the updates were Neola recommended updates as a result of changes in the law, and just some of them were not, and some of them, as Kelly and I, as members of the policy committee, were talking through with Mr. Banks, we're like, you know what, we should just bring them back to the board. These are worthy of discussions for us all to have, And so while we do typically just, give you a summary and say show you our recommended changes, there were a few on here that we would like to talk through. So the first one is 8120, and it relates to volunteers, and specifically relates to the degree of background checks that we do on our volunteers. Now, I will ask for Dr. Banks, or not, I'm gonna make you a doctor as well. So many people got their doctoral degree. Why not, Randy? You can be an honorary Mr. Banks' assistance. And just sharing what we do right now versus what's described here.
So we do have a matrix that we've established for several years that dictates.
Sorry.
The Board of Education currently uses a matrix that establishes the type of background check that you need based on the type of contact that you would have with students. So we have very basic background checks that would be done if you're visiting a school. That would be our visitor management system. And then we have a full FBI, BCI background check that you would use if you were chaperoning an overnight trip. And then there are several levels in between. This particular policy gives the board two options on the top of page 2. And during our discussion, the committee felt that it was important to bring these two options to the Board of Education.
So one of the things that we talked about is that while there may be, so you could have a volunteer that was at the lower clearance, and so they're not cleared to go on an overnight trip have that one-on-one with students. We still have situations within the district where, let's say you're taking the kindergarten class to the zoo, and you're responsible for 4 or 5 kindergarten students, and you're off on your own with those students. So there are a couple different ways we can address situations like that, and that was just one example that came up. We could require the higher level for those types of volunteer opportunities. We could ask our teachers and staff to always ensure that parents are paired together in those types of outings. But we didn't want to assume one or the other. I feel like there was one other example that we discussed during our committee. Do either one of you remember what it might be? No, that was the one. Okay.
Yeah, so the option at the top of page 2, our current practice is if someone flags for a violation, they are still able to be with their child, but they are not able to supervise other children. And that would be consistent with option 1. But then there are other offenses listed below that, which most of them align with law, but there is some options there at the bottom that could be specifically listed.
Oh, I missed issues. I'm sorry, I mixed issues. We actually decided on that one. So I apologize for confusing the rest of the board. That was not the one that we were bringing in front of you. The one that Randy just described is the one that we're bringing in front of you. So, and this was one where if they're convicted of, is this the one that I raised, Kelly, as a result of what's on that list? Okay. So the ORC includes on that list everything that's listed below. Actually, I'm sorry. Randy, I thought we resolved this one because we were not reading it the way that we had intended, that we were originally thinking. So did we resolve this one?
So we resolved the issue about the offenses, the list of offenses, and the one offense that you pulled out and they had questions about. And we looked up the ORC to see what the actual conviction would be, which we were okay with. So that did need to be discussed.
Okay.
Any further.
So it's just a matter of whether or not we wanted the volunteer to be informed that we were no longer interested in maintaining their volunteer services, and that they would not be able to work unsupervised with children other than obviously their own child, or that we would inform them that it had come back that they had been convicted of one of those crimes, and
all those things listed in option 2. And so it was just more so to bring the conversation, because this does handle our volunteers, just to make sure we were making sure that the board was okay with option 1 of informing the volunteer that we did do this background check and that this came up, and how we notified that volunteer is how I understood it.
okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. I started out obviously with my head in a different place. So I didn't remember us needing to bring this one to the entire board, but yes, if we're all comfortable with that first selection, essentially if someone is convicted of one of those prior offenses, they would be informed and they wouldn't be allowed to work with unsupervised children.
Right.
If there's any issues, if there aren't any issues with that, then we will recommend the first paragraph. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Apologies.
Do you want questions now or at the end?
You can ask questions now. Go for it. I would, yeah, let's have meaningful discussion as we go through them.
Yeah, I thought that'd be easier. My question is the and or in the prefatory portion at the top there of page 2, at least on the hard copy I have. Are there offenses in the revised code that are not listed, or are there listed offenses that are not in the revised code?
No, it should just, I mean, I think this is probably because the revised code could be updated to include other offenses. And if we've chosen to list them here and the revised code is updated, but this policy is not updated, then that's when the and or would be applicable.
That's a great point. Okay.
So I will tell you, the whole reason this came up in the first place was because a parent had brought to my attention, and I think I had shared this with everyone, the abortion without informed consent. And so all of a sudden, like my radar went up, a red flag went up, and I was like, that makes me very uncomfortable to not allow someone to be a volunteer if they had merely because they had an abortion, and that is not at all what that particular provision. That is like protecting someone if a doctor performed an abortion without an informed consent. So, Charlie, I don't have any issues with the offenses that are listed there, and I think that we originally landed on the first paragraph as a policy committee.
And our concern is we cannot, as a board, update our policy fast enough if the revised code adds another offense.
I mean, honestly, we update our policy all the time.
Right.
So the likelihood, so you're right. I mean, we could make it the offenses listed within the policy.
Described in the revised, yeah.
Yeah.
So both, I mean, I like the idea of listing them and also referring to the revised code. but I don't like the and or. Is there a way, again, I shared that same confusion about abortion without informed consent. Is there a better way to, I don't know how it's described in the revised code, but I wish.
It is described in detail in the revised code, which is why it's not confusing. Like, that's what we went and then looked.
Could we have a better description in our policies so
Sure,
that
we could
people?
have the more detailed description. I don't think there's any issue with
Yeah,
it.
and I think
Or
if I heard you right,
reference as described.
performing an abortion without.
Yes,
I mean, I think performing would do it if I heard it right.
it is
I would think
correct.
I would imagine it would depend on what the charge is. If that's not what the charge is, you wouldn't put something that's not the actual charge. Like, so people say DUI, for example. That's not what the charge is. The charge is OVI.
Right.
So you're not going to put DUI in something that's not the official charge.
Mm-hmm.
So that just would be my perspective, to put what the actual wording of
Okay.
the revised code says.
I would be perfectly fine with that as well.
The actual wording as it stands in the
Yeah.
ORC. And I'm comfortable with that as well too, because it was much clearer to us once we looked at the wording as described in the revised code. Okay, so we'll go back and include that language for the second reading.
One other general comment. I certainly support getting rid of gender-specific pronouns.
Yeah,
And I've never liked he, her, or he, she, but I still like what the federal rules of civil procedure did. They got rid of all pronouns, and that would be pretty easy to do. And actually, it enhances clarity and avoids ambiguity if you actually, rather than have to figure out what the antecedent is or who the antecedent is, you go that route. just so I'm clear, I'm against gender-specific pronouns.
No. Neil has been updating that. As they update each policy, they bring us the bulk of their policies. You'll see that is what they're doing with all of their policies. It's just have to go through all of our policies.
But I'd like to get rid of the they pronoun too.
Oh.
And most, it's pretty, usually it's like whatever the antecedent is, you just repeat it there rather than the pronoun.
I will tell you that is not a small lift, to be totally candid. I'm really grateful that Neola has taken it upon themselves to, every time they bring us a policy to update, they ensure that they go ahead and make those changes. And I don't think it's in the best interest. I don't think it's the best use of our time to do that, and I'm grateful that they have removed the
Would it be worth
gender-specific language.
suggesting to Neola that maybe
Sure.
they just
Absolutely.
eliminate pronouns? Because it can be done, and it does eliminate ambiguity when you're not quite clear what the antecedent for the pronoun is.
I don't mind sharing that feedback.
Okay. All right.
And I remain grateful that they're doing what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Absolutely. The next one was 8390. This one is a little bit easier to introduce because I remember exactly what it was that we were not comfortable with. And that is the entire policy, honestly, too. No, it's not. It is really around whether or not we are going to include not just a service animal within our policy, but also an emotional support animal and a therapy dog. Mr. Banks, would you mind sharing, I don't expect you to read anything, but I know that you took the time to ask our principals as to whether or not they had received any requests in this space, whether they had any feedback regarding the proposed policies.
Yeah, so I'm going to have Neil and Rob share, or one of the two that they collected the data from our principals on that. But before they do, we do have a policy and a procedure that we follow for classroom pets. We do have dogs in some of our buildings that serve as therapy dogs for some of our students, and we follow a process. This is just giving the district an option to expand that for guests to our school. So the board committee did have some discussion on that, and they sought some feedback from our principals, and I'll let Rob or Neil kind of highlight what they gathered.
Okay, good evening. So we did talk, both Rob and I spoke with a few of our counselors at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. We did receive feedback. I'll kind of put it, I guess, in three buckets. The first one being some concerns that they shared, and this is around the idea of emotional support animals. Let me first kind of say it's couched in the aspect of we do care for our students and want to make sure that they feel safe in the respective all aspects of school, that they understand that there are things that are triggers for them and their comfort level does help with academics. But there were concerns that were shared with around the idea of allergies, some other students that may have allergies to certain animals. I even know that when you talk about certain animals that are hypoallergenic, that they still are allergic. And we've had feedback of other students that are triggered having fear of even the sight of another animal in a space, and so that would be difficult. We talked a lot about systems that would have to be added, that we have to kind of work through if something like this goes forward. The idea of how do students supervise an emotional support animal, toileting, containment, feeding. The idea of training and support, what might that look like if some animal gets loose, bites or scratches another student. Talks about the idea of determining steps and practices to determine what approval looks like for a support animal. And one administrator talked about how they were in a school district previously that dipped their toe in the water, and requests came that was difficult to manage, and it didn't just become. We sometimes think animals might be the dog or a cat, but started to get into reptiles and other things. Talked about the idea of compliance factors being another system to navigate through. And then also possibly putting the school administrators, maybe a teacher at the center of a conflict of navigating for multiple families or students around emotional support animals that, again, might have those allergies or fears, knowing that there might be a 504 that might compel it if we allow this. So it talked about the ideas of thresholds of training requirements. We know that there have to be training requirements that come along with that. There are different levels of training that's required. Safety issues would become something that would have to navigate along with training and the certification of what does that look like. So based on the principal feedback that we received, I can speak for myself, but also with Mr. Messenheimer, that we didn't recommend allowing students to bring in emotional animals. We do think therapy dogs definitely is something that we could look into as part of the policy, and then also obviously service animals. And then obviously if that becomes a conversation that we do want to care about more about the support of our students, that we ask our principals and work with our school counselors and staff to think about other ways that we can help provide a supportive, safe, inclusive environment for our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Nupta. Mr. Messenheimer, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay, so to summarize, the request is not to include emotional support animals, and I didn't know if therapy dogs were a maybe because we already have one in the school district, but then just make sure that upon implementation, there's obviously that's not the first thing that we go to from a therapy session or from a standpoint of needing to the tools that we can offer our students to feel safe and comforted and supported.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So we had not met with Dr. Gupta or Mr. Messenheimer about this issue, and again, we thought it was one that was worthy of everyone hearing that firsthand, and so I open it up for anyone else who has questions regarding the topics.
Have we had requests for the emotional support animals? That's the same question.
Yeah, Dr. Gupta and I talked a little bit about that, and neither one of us have had a request that we're aware of at any of our buildings for emotional support animals.
Okay, and then therapy dog is just the one at Kilbourne High School that's with a staff member?
I can tell you we did have one at the Phoenix Academy a few years ago, but I don't know any others at the secondary.
Phoenix Academy or Worthington Academy?
Phoenix and Worthington Academy did have one.
Each?
Well,
Or they shared one?
Shared between the two schools. Kim's saying that there was occupational therapist has one.
One of the, a staff member.
Any other questions from members of the board? I will, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, my question is, what does the blue plus mean? Does that mean we're adding this language?
No, I mean, those were the areas that we wanted to discuss.
Okay.
Those were the dependent upon the feedback that we received in the discussion we had, we would determine what we move forward with. So I would think that, I mean, Kelly, obviously let me know if you feel differently, but we have a therapy dog within the district. We've had therapy dogs in the district. It's good to have written policy related to something like that. I mean, tell me if you feel otherwise, but we would not check emotional support animal because there hasn't been a need, and it sounds like there are a lot of things that would need to be considered in checking that box, and that we could revisit that at another time if the situation presented itself that there was the need.
So the recommendation is to delete emotional support animal?
That's the suggestion I'm giving, just based upon not check that option.
But keep the therapy dog?
Correct, because we have one and we have had them.
And everybody's comfortable with that language? Because I agree we should, if we're going to have them, we should have a policy.
I just feel like it sets the expectation that our community members can go and understand what we expect in that space.
Sorry for just feedback. Mr. Missenheimer and I just kind of gathered feedback from our principals on the emotional support animals. We didn't actually look at the policy to be able to say on the other parts,
Okay.
So just not prepared to say anything either way about it. But that would be our recommendation, is not to check the box on the emotional support animal.
Okay, so we can work offline to make sure that you are comfortable with the specifications that are included related to therapy dogs, and make sure that those are included in the second reading. It wouldn't be anything different. It would just be an inclusion or not inclusion based upon what's in front of you right now. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. And that takes us to 75, 40, 02, 03, and 04. And all of this relates to AI and things like ChatGPT, and whether or not, well, I will just say that obviously a new and evolving area. And our inclination, and Kelly, please chime in, was that, obviously, we don't want students writing with, papers with that. So we don't want them to presenting that as their work. And at the same time, we also don't want to restrict their access to it. We want them, this is going to be a part of their life here on out. And we want them to learn how to use this tool, what it should be used for, what are the limitations, as we as society continue to do just that. So we were inclined, that should be reflected in what we chose for those three policies, and we merely wanted to make sure that if you wanted to discuss that further, that we provide the opportunity tonight to do so. Don't everyone jump at AI at once. And if there are no questions or comments, the rest of it was fairly in line with the recommendations from Neola. And go ahead, Randy. Sorry.
Yeah, I just have one comment regarding 754002. This is in response to the board policy committee that adopted Neola policies intentionally kept this part open because it was new, and we didn't want to disrupt what some teachers were doing in regards to having students submit assignments or gain content from an app or a web page. I will point out on page 2, we're taking Neola's recommendation, and we are saying that staff members will no longer be able to require students to go to their personal web pages or other sites to check grades, obtain class assignments. So it is narrowing the options for our staff, but it's been a while since we adopted this policy, and I think our staff have adapted to that. But we do want to point out that could be a change for some people. And then the second says that if a staff member creates content or apps, that it would be hosted on the board server. So those are 2 new things that the policy committee 5 years ago decided to steer away from because it was new, and it's now being recommended that we move that direction. And then in addition to that, there's some AI things that are very new.
Thank you very much. We don't have any reason to believe, for whatever it's worth, that teachers are sending students to their app or their webpage. But obviously, there's a collection of personally identified information there, information that we keep confidential, that we would not want our teachers to be collecting separately off of our system.
Okay, well, if you think of anything between now and our next meeting,
Let us know, and we'll pull Jeff into those discussions.
Yeah.
Or if you think of anything.
Or if I think of anything, yeah. Go look back a minute. Thank you again to Tracy for this chart. And just letting you know that having that all in one place is just tremendously helpful.
It is very helpful.
For sure.
And so the plan then is for this to come up for a vote at the next board meeting?
That is accurate. That would be our official second reading.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments about policy? All right. If not, we're ready for reports and announcements. Start with the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I'd like to point out that this report was not written by AI. The next one might be, based on this policy, but this one was not. So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We have 4 vision statements, and we attempt to put this report to accentuate each one of those vision statements. So our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. This is Teacher Appreciation Week. Excuse me. And we know that nothing is more important than the teacher in the classroom. So last week, we had the opportunity to recognize 23 longtime Worthington educators who are retiring at the end of this school year. By my count, this group worked for 18 to 20 different Worthington Board of Education presidents, 7 different superintendents, countless school principals. They've served anywhere between 900 and 4,500 individual students, depending on the grade levels that they taught during their career. And I like to say they moved from playing Oregon Trail on the Apple IIe to having students put their writing assignments in ChatGPT from their smartphone. So every day this group showed up for kids and families. They worked diligently, period after period, day after day, grading period after grading period, year after year. They invested in relationships, they counseled, they gave advice, they worked to improve their teaching. As technology changed and grew, they changed and grew with it. This group never stopped learning, and we really are thankful for these 22 longtime educators and their faithful service to Worthington Schools. The second vision statement that we have is we'll provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. As has been mentioned at the start of this meeting by Dr. Wilson, last week really was a tragic week in Worthington. We are heartbroken by the loss of a student and also a colleague. In Worthington, we use the phrase, be kind to kids, but what we really mean at the core is that we want people just to love them, care for them, help them, and really what was affirming is that our entire team, who was at Perry on Tuesday and our transportation office on Wednesday, really did love people well. Our counselor and mental health teams, as well as our crisis team, dropped what they were doing and came to help. Guys, we never, ever want tragedy to occur. And yet when it does, and when it did last week, I'm really proud of how our team responded. So we know the days ahead will be difficult. These are not one-day events. Students and families will continue to need support. And what I would say is that our team is ready to continue to provide that needed support. Third is we'll provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. And we're working to do that in multiple different ways. So the City of Worthington and the Worthington Chamber of Commerce have partnered together to produce a podcast series called Amplify Worthington. They're really doing outstanding work. And finally, they let me on the podcast. And so the latest episode is focused on updates and things to come from Worthington schools. It is live now. Promotional start on Wednesday, but you can find the Amplify Worthington podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon. So anywhere you listen to your podcast, we'd encourage you to listen to the episode in the car while taking a walk or even on your computer at work. And so thanks to the city and chamber for featuring our schools. We appreciate their partnership. And then finally, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community resources. Guys, last week was a really tough election week for schools that were on the ballot. 2/3 of new money requests were defeated. This isn't far from the norm. But it always serves to remind us that we're very fortunate in Worthington and that we have strong support for education in this community. And we appreciate that support. Dr. Wilson, that's the superintendent's report, not written by AI.
Thank you very much. We'll see if AI can top that next meeting. All right, now our treasurer's report.
Good evening. I will say that I did listen to the said Amplify Worthington podcast, and David McCorkle mentioned some economic development, mentioned my name, so if he is listening, perhaps I too can get an invite on a future episode of Amplify Worthington, and then we can try to measure and compete against ratings. 2 items from our office this month. The monthly financial report for April was distributed to the board on Friday and released on our website. It follows a similar trend that we've been discussing. General fund revenues continue about 1% over projections, and expenses are trending under. That made its way into the draft 5-year forecast that was presented to both the Treasurer Advisory Committee and the Board Finance Committee last week. Both those meetings were very productive. I will say all members but one were at TAC. So that was quite a turnout that we haven't had in a while, and that provided for some great conversation. I appreciate all of those folks who are willing to tough it out on an evening and discuss school finance. The forecast will be finalized and presented to the board at the next meeting, so we'll have that live at the next meeting. Secondly, the insurance committee met on April 27th, and I just realized Mrs. Lloyd is on that, so if you are going to give that update about the EAP, I can. We met and heard a proposal from a new EAP vendor named Matrix. So most employers have what they call an EAP, or an employee assistance program. It's basically an intervention program to assist employees in resolving issues that may be adversely affecting their performance. So this can be anything from substance abuse to counseling, relationship challenges, overall wellness, and mental health. Matrix is a local, independently owned practice founded in 1976 by an OSU grad, Dr. Kurt Malkoff. And what really sets them apart in terms of what the committee saw were 2 things. The first is that when you call in, they guarantee that you will have an appointment with a counselor within 4 days, which is vastly quicker than months in what we're seeing in the industry. And then they also, all of their counselors are in the Anthem network. So Worthington Schools, our employee medical plan is with Anthem. All of their counselors are with Anthem. And so if there is a need to continue on with those counseling sessions after the 8 sessions included in the plan, then it will be, you don't have to worry about that counselor is not in your plan and you have to make a difficult choice to switch counselors. So all of those counselors are in our plan. The plan also includes several other benefits, including supervisor consultation. So think about if one of our managers, a principal, is dealing with a difficult situation, they can call in and seek counseling on that. Fraud and identity theft services, which are seeing more rampant, legal consultation, elder care consultation, and 24/7 on-site critical incident response services. So as we had mentioned, It was a rough week in Worthington schools. These folks are local. They have an office in Worthington, 3 other offices locally, and they can provide staff on the ground on site in a critical incident, a certain number of site visits a year. The committee was impressed and voted to switch vendors and move to Matrix, so we're lining that transition up for around July 1. The cost is slightly higher than our current provider, but as part of our switch to Anthem, we secured additional wellness dollars. So that as part of the bid package, Anthem provides us $65,000 in wellness funds, and so we believe that the majority of the cost increase will be absorbed by those wellness funds. Dr. Wilson, that is all.
All right. We're now ready. We're now ready for board or committee announcements and reports. Amy?
Okay, I'll start, but Jennifer, are you going to give a TAC report?
Yeah.
Or do you mind giving one?
I know, I've got it on my list.
Because I didn't write all those notes down in here because I was counting on that you would. So, okay, thank you. As TJ mentioned, I did attend the insurance committee meeting. I appreciate you giving the overview, TJ, because mine would have been 3 bullet points on that meeting. Just a quick overview of that. So on April 25th, I attended the Worthington Library's community breakfast, which was really well attended by community members and community leaders. Lauren Robinson, our new director, spoke and provided an update as to some of the happenings, including recommendation stations, which is only to Worthington libraries kiosk type thing that they're going to roll out. I don't remember how soon, but
soon. I don't remember the exact date either.
Yeah, I don't remember, but just really cool. I know that the library does that already with book recommendations, but to have something really cool like that and combination of librarians and technology working together to create that was just a really neat thing to share. And then on April 26th, I attended the Worthington Pools Tour, which I believe everybody was sent out that piece of paper that had just the overview of the pools and the ages of everything. And that was pretty much what the extent of that actual tour was just kind of reviewing for the task force group what all we have now here in Worthington. And then on April 27th, I attended the Worthington Partnership Annual Meeting. What I wanted to share, that was also really well attended. But what I wanted to really share about that particular event was there was a presentation that was given on Intel by a woman named Betsy Goldstein. And she's going around Columbus and the region really, and sharing information that we may not necessarily see in media about what the Intel project is going to mean for this region. And I just wanted to encourage everybody, if you have an opportunity to hear her speak. I think she's coming in August to speak with Building Worthington's Future, that group here in town. So that might be an opportunity, and I can share that when that comes forward. But I could talk for a while. I've already told Dr. Bowers a whole lot about some of the things I heard, and I think it's really important for us all to hear it. But what I will just say about it is we all know Intel's coming, but just in terms of the impacts to our community, and we're going to feel that as a school district in terms of what does that mean for housing, what does that mean for families, really what does that mean on a socioeconomic level, because it's going to put a lot of pressure on our community in terms of especially housing costs. And so I just encourage all of you, if you have an opportunity. I was kind of walked out of there and just was really grateful that I was able to hear that presentation, because it gave me much greater understanding of what's going to occur in our region in the future, in the very near future. Then I mentioned the insurance committee meeting. Jennifer and I attended the TAC meeting on May 1st. And thank you for providing the report. And then I just wanted to share on May 5th, I had the opportunity to be a parent volunteer for the 3rd grade Worthington field trip. And I just wanted to give a quick public shout out to the Worthington Historical Society for that program that they put on for our students, because it is just a really great program, and the kids really seem to enjoy it. And that's all I have. So thank you.
Be glad to go next. So We actually had 2 policy committee meetings between our last meeting and this one. And for its worth, the volunteers one that I totally fumbled at the very beginning was at a policy committee meeting before that. So I should have reviewed the notes a little bit more thoroughly versus relying upon my memory. But one meeting was related specifically to the IT policies. Thank you, Jeff, for meeting with us and making sure that we fully understood your recommendation. And the other one was related to the Board of Education handbook, which Kelly and I are diligently working on to make sure that it is in a good, clean, revised draft format for our meeting on Friday. Attended a finance committee meeting. As TJ mentioned, he shared the draft 5-year forecast. TJ, as you all know, does an excellent job keeping us up to speed on all things financial through every single week, so there really won't be anything surprising there, and everything looked great. And then had the privilege of attending the internal key communicators meeting, and there have been too many meetings in between the last meeting and the last board meeting and this one, and so I'm like scratching my head to think whether or not there was anything. There was nothing. I think it's everyone's at that end of the school year space and trying to get over the finish line. And I don't remember any significant issues. Do you, Jennifer? I'll let you speak to them if you remember any significant issues at that meeting.
Just one thing on the external that I'll bring up.
Okay.
Was
Excellent.
discussed, but
All right.
Thank you. Jennifer, go ahead, Jennifer.
Go. So I'll go out of order here and then get confused, but I'll start with the key communicator. The external in the morning, you all saw the kind of draft from Trent of everything that was going to be discussed, and everyone really appreciated it. The one question that came up with the group was the swimming pool, swimming, like who owns the pool, and those kind of questions. So Trent was able to give a very good description of how that all works. So that was really the only kind of issue that came up.
It's interesting how that one continues to come up. Like, do we have, I feel like you can search and probably get one of your prior blogs pretty quickly that would come up on a Google search results. I don't know if there's anything more to do, if there's any place on our website where it's easy to pull a blurb from your blog and put it on there.
On there of who
but it
owns
does regularly come up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, especially now.
Of course.
It's going to keep coming
I'm not
up.
trying to make a to-do out of it. I'm just trying to
So-
think of, is there any space, any place where we could put and easily direct people to the type of explanation that I'm sure you gave and I've seen you give in other situations.
It was really
some
helpful.
key bullet points, yes.
Yeah, everyone is very glad to have that explanation. And then the TAC committee, I want to thank TJ for the great committee. The group is much larger than it's ever been. It's a very diverse group. People have financial backgrounds. Most of the people in attendance were involved in asking questions, but not only did we talk about the 5-year forecast, but TJ had a presentation on the construction going on, and a legislative update. So he really framed the whole picture that we're looking at and able to discuss the changes in the forecast. So it was a good discussion, and I know next week when we actually have the forecast in front of us that we'll talk about some of those changes. So that was a great meeting. Amplify Worthington that they brought up, it's a great podcast. I'm happy they invited Trent to be there, and I'll remind him about you, TJ. But Trent was able to talk about the building updates and then education and partnerships and things we're working on. And if people haven't had a chance to listen yet, you get to hear Trent's favorite class in high school. So, I'll just kind of give that little teaser out there that you got to listen to hear what that was. And then last week now, I guess, many of us attended the Board Leadership Institute from OSBA, and they had a lot of good sessions and a lot of time that we got to interact with other board members, which is always good. But I especially liked the presentations on leadership by Jim Mahoney, who's one of our district residents, and then family engagement, and I've kind of shared some of that with Trent already. So it was a good 2 days there. And that's it for me.
Okay, just a second though, while we're on the issue of TJ on a podcast, I think it's really critical we get TJ on the podcast because he has the perfect face for a podcast.
Poor TJ.
Can't disagree.
Can I add one quick thing on the pools and the comment about adding some of the blog posts? I actually, because I was going back through historical, I actually pulled together a document that has all of those, all of Dr. Bauer's blog posts, the different meetings that have taken place over the last couple of years. If that would be helpful, Dr. Bowers, I can send that to you. So you have that with all in one spot, so.
Kelly, you can tell a joke because yours can't fall flatter than mine did.
I will tell no jokes. Let's see. Well, we already talked about, we had policy committee meetings. Hopefully that will be a good discussion. I'm looking forward to finalizing that board handbook on Friday. And then you heard about the finance update for our finance committee. I did get to attend the retirement recognition, which was really great. And there was some, I always mess it up and I ask Rondell all the time. What's the app called that you can, I don't know why I can't remember it. Probably because I'm old. Thank you. That, where you writing a speech, right? So we got to experience that.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, that was written that way. Anyway, so that was just some
For those who weren't in attendance, it was Brian Morgan.
Yes.
Yes. Gave us a speech written by ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's great.
It was. That was the thing, is that it was great. And it was like personable and everything. And you're just like, wow, that was created like in 30 seconds or something. Anyway, so that was good. But it was just always good to hear like the impact that our teachers have on our students. And I also loved hearing about what they're going to do when they're done, like when they're retired, and just all the things that they do. You picture them just in the classroom, but they're doing so much more. They're volunteering here and there. They're showing up at our kids' sporting events and all the extra things. So, so that was really good. And I also attended the Board Leadership Institute. This was my first time attending that. And so I went to a couple of different sessions. So they have different sessions throughout the 2-day time period. So the first one I went to was on crisis communication. And so the communications director from Olentangy Schools gave that presentation, which was really valuable. Then there was a presentation about what would Ted Lasso do? So just giving you some life tips. If you don't watch the show, you should. Just ways to help you be a better board member, essentially. Then there was another one on creating a positive culture. Then there were opportunities for collaboration, which was very similar to Portrait of a Learner that we're going to be doing this fall. So I was able to share that information with Angie. And then the next day I went to a policy meeting to check your policies to make sure that, students that need some extra support are being recognized through our policy, like students with disabilities, military families, students that are homeless or in foster care, and a couple of other there. So that was really good, obviously being on the policy committee. And then the last one was handling conflict, which is just, we all encounter conflict. And so just how to do that with grace and positivity. So it was a really good program. Always ones that I'm like, ooh, I have to choose between this one or this one for this section. So it's good that OSBA has that to offer so we can learn things and collaborate with other board members as well. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I just want to echo what Amy said. I thought the library breakfast was very good, and the food was good. And I'm excited about the new director. I think she's energetic, gung-ho. She lives in our district, and actually she's a neighbor of mine, as it turns out. But didn't know that until I went there. Secondly, I agree also the retirees. It was I think the WA has made a really wise decision by splitting that from the honoring the volunteers. We need to honor volunteers, obviously, but it got too long and it distracted from both. But I did have a question. It came up here again. I'm not really familiar with Oregon Trail. When I first got on a computer, my very first time, I played Pong. Did that come before Oregon Trail? I missed Oregon Trail. Did I miss?
Pong was before.
Oh, Pong was first. Okay. I played it, I believe, on my Commodore 64, if I remember right. But I stopped playing it. I've never played a video game since my 3-year-old son beat me in Pong. I decided I was not wired to do video games. So once he could beat me when he was 3, I gave up video games. So I must have missed Oregon Trail. I agree. The Board Leadership Institute was very good, and we may have more conversation about that when we talk about governance. We're talking about process, procedure, not at our work session on Friday. And then I just, again, want to thank our administration, our principals, our teachers, our support staff. A couple of us went to Elia's viewing, and the family was effusive about how many and how kind our support staff showed up, teachers showed up, principals showed up, and so many administrators. So I just wanted to thank all the people in our district for that kinds of things. I think it's what helps distinguish our district. Otherwise, I have nothing else to add. All right, we're ready now for the approval of routine financial items. Mr. Cusick.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve items E2 and E3. E2 are the minutes from the April 24th meeting, and E3 are some general fund routine appropriation transfers across objects netting to zero. So recommend that the board approve items E2 and E3.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve items E2 and E3. Is there any discussion, comments, questions? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Motion passes. Now we're ready for Treasurer's new business, approval of new student organizations. Mr. Cusick.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the board approve the establishment of the following student organizations and to allow the establishment of new activity funds to collect money and pay for associated expenditures of the 4 Perry buildings listed. As a bit of background, our policy requires that the Board of Education acknowledge student groups before we allow them to collect funds. We went through a lengthy process several years ago before Perry was reopened, and it came to our attention that since Perry reopened, we have omitted them in our list of clubs, and so this corrects that. We worked with the principal to establish these or to figure out which ones they have, and this is what came back. And so we ask that the board now approve the following clubs.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve these 4 new student organizations. Is there any questions, comments, discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion passes. At this time, the consent agenda. Dr.
Yes,
Bowers.
thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda, items G2 through G10. Items G2 through G10, please.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any questions, comments, discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, continue.
I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H1. H1 is the acceptance of the donations that are listed on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the acceptance of donations. Any questions, comments, or discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is the 2024 calendar year budget for the Worthington Public Library as adopted by the Library Board of Trustees at its April 18th, 2023 regular board meeting, and it's indicated in the enclosure. So item H2, the adoption of the Worthington Public Library budget.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the public library budget. Any questions, comments? After 16 years on the board, I think I've finally figured how this works. We have no control or authority whatsoever over the library. It has its own board. They don't report to us. We don't report to them. We do have to approve them. And my understanding, which I be glad to subject to correction, is that the reason it works this way is that the Worthington Library is not just Worthington, it's the entire school district. And under the law, as I read the Ohio Revised Code, the library has to get approval from the whole school board in order to do these kinds of things, in order to be a district library rather than just being a Worthington City library. And that's why we have to approve these things. But I don't know what happens if we don't, but nobody report, we're not the place to come to complain about library stuff, but they've got their own board that people can complain to.
Right. We don't deal with their operations. We
Right.
only approve their budget and their one trustee each year.
Yeah, we have
That's
to
our
approve.
only assignment.
Right. But, okay. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay, it's always bugged me that, okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H3. It's recommended that the board approve the attached resolution for an owner-controlled insurance program in conjunction with Phase 2 construction projects for liability purposes.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, so we're approving the motion is to approve the owner-controlled insurance program, not to be confused with the builder's risk insurance, which is coming up. Okay. Any questions, discussion? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H4. Item H4 is the recommended approval to purchase builder's risk insurance coverage for Phase 2 of the building project.
May I have
So
a,
moved.
okay, we've got a motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the builder's risk insurance coverage. Any questions, comments? Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
All right. We're now ready for actions recommended by the Board of Education. The first one deals with the curriculum resource adoption. I would like to entertain at this time a motion to approve the adoption of the textbooks as was presented at our last board meeting. Any motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to approve the textbooks that were presented at the last board meeting, about which we also had some comments here at the board meeting. Any comments, questions? I just want to say two things. I did read the books as well, except I can't say I carefully read the pre-calculus book, but I did skim it. And I definitely agree with our speaker who said, I love the history part of the chemistry book. I thought it was fabulous. And I thought about the social studies books, I guess I will echo what another speaker is that, I wish my kids had had that book, and I certainly wish I'd had it when I was in school, or had those books. So I'm enthusiastic about the books, although I still wish they had a bibliography, but you can't have everything. All right, any other discussion? All right, if not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion passes. At this time, we got the approval of the negotiated agreement with the Worthington Education Support Professionals. May I have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the collective bargaining agreement. Are there any questions or comments by the board?
just a thank you to the team that worked on this. So I appreciate all the time and effort.
And Melinda, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you're welcome to. Okay. And having observed the negotiations, I want to thank the professionalism of our support professionals. It was a very professional negotiation. Your team is a very good team. It was persistent, but very professional. They certainly, all I can say is your members more than got their money's worth. It was a really good negotiation. You and your team were tenacious and did a great job of bargaining. And but in the end, I still think it was a great contract for both sides. And we look forward to working with our support professionals for the next 3 years. Any other questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Motion passes. Are there any requests, questions, or concerns from the board?
I only wanted to share one thing, and that is I had the pleasure of meeting with Rabbi Rick Kellner last week about some work that he has been doing very much in collaboration throughout Ohio and with other districts about teaching about the Holocaust for Ohio educators. I will send this out via electronic form, but there is an actual 2-day seminar that's being put on by Echoes and Reflections. It's a free 2-day seminar. It's hosted at local congregation, and teachers can earn up to 12 contract hours. I guess it's, turned in for 12 contract hours up to 1.2 CEUs. I am going to see if I can attend some of it, but it sounds like something, it sounds like something they're going to try to continually put on. As many of us have probably seen in local news, there is absolutely a rise in anti-Semitism, and I think grounding our community in accurate education is very valuable. Ensuring that our educators feel comfortable in teaching accurate historical context around the Holocaust is very valuable. So I will share all of this. In addition to that, there is also he shared with me a No Place for Hate framework for creating an equitable school climate that is put on by the Anti-Defamation League. I am going to take it upon myself to look further into that and bring more context back to the board about what that entails and what it would potentially bring to the district where I think it's on a school basis, but what it could bring to our schools if our schools would choose to join that. But in the meantime, I will send you the details on the June 6th and 7th programs, and that is all.
Okay, I do hope board members can attend. I've only heard Rabbi Kellner speak once, and if my memory serves, and it often doesn't, I believe he spoke at November 8th at the Professional Learning Day at Thomas Worthington, and his presentation was truly outstanding. So I think I would urge anyone, if it's open to some of us at least, I would love to attend.
It's open and free.
Okay. Amy, do you have anything? I'm sorry. No, I don't. Kelly? Jennifer? Okay, I don't have anything either, so we move to the calendar. So our next meeting is a special work session on Friday at 12:30. And our primary focus will be the handbook again, which I believe the policy committee will lead the discussion, and then speak about various governance issues relating to governance. Then we will be meeting on May 22nd, again at 6:30. I want to emphasize the 6:30 5-year forecast, and just so that everyone knows, number one, before May 22nd is on May 21st is our graduation, the day before, and I think I've made every single graduation, but I'm going to miss that one because my board duties come very high, but my grandson's baptism comes higher, and he's getting baptized in Minneapolis on that same day. And so it's impossible to be both places. And my wife and I will be driving back, and their activities don't end until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So we'll head back about 1 or 2 a.m. And I hope to be here for the board meeting, but if not, Vice President Hudson, I'll keep you informed by phone that I can't control traffic. We're driving back. So, okay, so that's May 22nd, where the 5-year forecast. Then we have another work session on June 2nd, which I believe is a Friday, if I recall right, here at 12:30 here at the WEC about goal setting. And then our next regular meeting after that, after the May 22nd one, will be June 12th. And again, I want to emphasize 6:30. I think all of our board meetings, well, the work sessions are 12:30. The regular ones are 6:30, I believe, from here on out. Questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of employment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We're going to executive session and non-debatable motion. So, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes, motion passes. We're not adjourning now, but we will come out of the meeting to adjourn, but we will be conducting absolutely no business after the executive session. Anybody's free to hang around, but they can't go to executive session. But all we'll be doing is voting to adjourn. So thank you very much for coming. And I'm hoping spring is finally here, that summer doesn't beat spring here.